So for over 5,000 years of human history, there have been a number of problems we can't seem to solve. We can't figure out pi, one sock always disappears in the laundry, and for 5,000 years the fault lines between people groups along lines like race, class, nationality, gender have caused enormous pain and anguish, including right here in our country in the last 12 months. We've tried everything, but we can't seem to educate the problem out of us, or legislate the problem out of us, or debate the problem out of us. But maybe there's a greater power that actually has the ability to heal when nothing else will. Welcome to Sunday's Best 3 Minutes. We're not going to try to solve pi here, but we are taking one big idea from Sunday's message and bringing it to you in a portable package. In the New Testament book of Acts, we get a story where the classic fault lines along race start to play out in the early church. It says this: the Hellenistic Jews, those are the Jews that were born outside of Israel, among them complained against the Hebraic Jews. Those are the Jews that were raised in Israel because their widows are being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 gathered together all the disciples. Now, as far as we can tell, this problem was unintentional, but just because it wasn't intentional doesn't mean it's not a problem. So the ones who were overlooked tell the apostles about it. And what do the apostles do? They listen. So far as we can tell, they don't blame, they don't defend, they don't rationalize or talk about how hard they're trying or just ignore the problem altogether. They get a complaint along racial lines and they listen. This willingness to listen rather than to get emotionally flooded and go into like anger response mode is the only way to get these barriers broken down. And here's where the spiritual work and power comes in. They're able to listen and ultimately to heal this fault line because of the spiritual power of Jesus that unlocks this whole thing. First, Jesus' victory over death makes a way for humanity to be reconciled with God and with each other perfectly once and for all. What we see throughout the scriptures is that the dividing walls between people used to be thick as steel, but now after Jesus' death, they're papier-mâché walls. And the apostles are leaning into the finished work of Christ to unite all the people. Secondly, the apostles can listen and not get defensive because their identity is secured in Christ. They're not building their lives around their reputation or their ethnicity anymore. They are Jesus' people first, called to love and serve their neighbor. And Jesus has already declared them to be forgiven sinners. So when someone complains that they've sinned against them, they're not shocked. This isn't new news. The power of Christ, the love of Christ, the forgiveness of Christ is what empowers them to listen, to admit where they've made mistakes, and go to work fixing the problem. Perhaps the greatest, most consistent failure of Christians over the last 2,000 years is our unwillingness or inability to bring the spiritual power of the cross and the empty tomb to break through barriers and heal fault lines between people that have been plagued for humanity for all time. So this week, if you're a Jesus person, I want to invite you to do some prayer and thought work. One, what does the cross and empty tomb have to say about you and about what God's intentions are to bring people together in Christ? And from that safe and secure place, secondly, I want to invite you to listen. 7 days, no arguing, just listening, and see what God might show you. Thanks so much for joining us this week on Sunday's Best 3